Hey folks, Trubie here. Take two. I just managed to record this whole thing once and didn't have audio for some reason. So let's do this again. Well, Trubie here. I'm here to talk to you about Dice Masters. So this week, 2 o'clock on Sunday, we have our Golden Age event. And I thought, with Golden Age coming up, why not take a look back at one of the scourges of our old Golden Age, Polly Hulk. Back in the day, Dane Luman and Jared Bierce just terrorized our store with this, and terrorized some of the stores in Pittsburgh with it as well. It was a rough team to deal with, and I thought I'd go over it. Let's actually bring up the team real quick. Sorry. Yeah, there we go. Yes. Polly Hulk. There were a couple variations of this, but I'm going to talk about one of them. It's not the strongest. There's a couple pieces in here you can swap in and out, but I'll just go through the general pieces, why they're here, what it did, and why it was so hard to deal with. So yeah, let's get right into it. And let me switch to a different view real quick. Also, as you can see here, I'm going to go through like the first couple turns, showing some of the options of things to buy, and how the first couple turns of this would go. Because really, after the first couple of turns, this thing would lock you down and just smack you in the face. And I'm going to go over that. So, well, first off, we had Polymorph. Polymorph was the main crux of the team. It allowed you to get in a Jinzo or a Hulk, sure thing, on turn 3. Really hard to deal with when that happened. Yeah, obviously they could miss the roll, and when they did, you breathed a great sigh of relief. But yeah, it lets you swap a character that's in the field for another character that's in your use pile. So you would buy Jinzo, he'd be in your use pile, and you'd swap him in. Or you'd buy Hulk. I guess we're calling it Poly Hulk. But yeah, you also would do it with Jinzo or Zombie Magneto. We'll get to those in a little bit. And then the other basic action would usually be Magic Missile. Almost exclusively for the global, pay 1 bolt and deal 1 damage to target character die. More often than not, you'd be dealing it to your Hulk. And when Hulk would take damage, he would deal 3 damage across the board. There was also a dragon in Yu-Gi-Oh! That had the same global on him. Sometimes they'd use that instead and use a different global or a different basic action. But more often than not, they'd use Magic Missile. Yeah, let's go to the characters now. The big daddy of them all, the one that made this whole thing possible, is Professor X. They never actually bought Professor X. They just used him for the global. So, and that global is pay mask, move up to 2 psychic dice from your use pile to the prep area. This was, one of my nemesis. I hate this card still, but I'm glad it's rotated out. But yeah, he made this team possible. So yeah, let's go on to the next card. Constantine. Constantine was sort of like the original Shriek. Everyone used him. He's just 2 cost. His cost and ability were too good. Well, not too good, but they were very, very strong. So you just basically you had to play with them. But then you had the fun little mini game where you had to try to remember to name a card or name a die at the beginning of your opponent's turn. Because if you name a die at the beginning of your opponent's turn, if they draw that die and field it, that character and all matching character dice are blanked. So yeah. Constantine was great. You just had to remember to use him. That was so easy to forget. And yeah, he would help protect your team. So things like Dwarf Wizard or another Constantine, they'd be blanked when they came in. Most of the things that could help your opponent remove stuff from your board would be taken care of. It would also help slow down rush teams, because not only are they blanked, but they can't attack. So if you say Guy Gardner, if they field Guy Gardner, they can't attack with Guy Gardner. So that's just a way to buy yourself a couple more turns to get your lockdown in place. Next card, Black Widow Serena. She wasn't a must-have on this team. She's just one of many. I think she's a good fit for the team because that first turn you want a 2 cost, and in this case, if you miss the shield for Constantine, you can instead spend a fist, hopefully get that, and buy her instead. But you don't have to use this one. One of the other versions would use Nova, the rare Nova from AVX, where when he's attacking and takes damage, you deal 2 damage to your opponent. So you would Magic Missile him you'd attack with him and magic missile him, and for every time you bolted him with magic missile, you'd deal 2 damage to your opponent. Kind of mean, kind of gross, but and then he'd still be attacking, so you'd have to either block him and deal damage to him and take another 2 damage, or let him through, and his attack stats for like 5, 6, 7 or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but it was a lot of damage. But he was a 5 cost. Black Widow Serena here is only a 2 cost. Next card, Hulk, the namesake of the team. So yeah, when Hulk is active, when either you or Hulk takes damage, Hulk deals 2 damage to each opposing character, and if he's on the burst phase, he deals 3. So you're going to be using Polymorph to get him in. When you use Polymorph, you're bringing him in on level 1, which is a 6/5 and burst phase. So more often than not, he's going to be dealing that 3 damage. Also triggers when the player takes damage. So if you're going against this and you're using Serena and you attack, that triggers Hulk. I always like Johnny Storm, and when you field another character, Johnny Storm deals 1 damage to target character and your opponent. So Johnny Storm would also trigger Hulk. So yeah, he was another thing that was a big thorn in my side. So yeah, he was tough. Next up, Jinzo. Now I think when people started using Jinzo on this team, this is when it got really sick, because while this monster is active, your opponent must pay 2 life to use an action die or global ability. That's paying of life. It's different than taking damage. So like things like what's the capture? I'm forgetting the name of the capture basic action, but that one would capture until you took damage. Jinzo wouldn't trigger that because you'd be paying life instead. But the way this got really disgusting was, they get Jinzo out, like turn 3, they'd still be using Professor X like mad, and Jinzo's there. If you want to continue trying to use Professor X to keep up, you're losing life heavily. You're hemorrhaging life badly, and it got to the point where your opponent could sit back while you kept on hitting yourself trying to keep up, while they're building up, Hulk, Zombie Magneto, a bunch of Serenas, whatever, and get in for the coup de grace, the final big hit. So it was hard to deal with. They get Jinzo out and then just run away with the game. Next up, Zombie Magneto. So Zombie Magneto was a defensive piece. With the 3 of these, the 3/6 costs, you could basically really adjust your playstyle based on what your opponent's doing. So if they're going and using your Xavier heavily, you can go for Jinzo first. If they're going for all their counter pieces, like if they're going for Dwarf Wizard or something, you can go straight to Zombie Magneto to prevent that from being able to blank anything. If they're doing something else, like if they're going just a Serena Rush, you go to Hulk. So then they're triggering the Hulk and dealing damage in the field. There's just a lot of options of how you can play against the various teams with just those 3, because you're almost guaranteed to get one of those on turn 3, and you're generally probably going to get a couple more of them out in the next 2 or 3 turns. So it wasn't unheard of to get all 3 out and just get crushed. But yeah, and even today, like Zombie Magneto would still stop Shriek. It'd stop Deep Pureblood. It's a rough card, really rough card. It's Doom Caliber Knight. When an opponent, this might seem like an odd one on here, but it was actually a pretty bright idea. When an opponent uses an action die, you may cancel the effect and knock out this monster. So you must cancel the effect and knock out this monster. So one of the main things to stop this team was Prismatic Spray. That was the best way to try to stop this team. And Doom Caliber Knight was the best way to stop it. So you would get Doom Caliber Knight, they'd go to Prismatic Spray, you knock out Doom Caliber Knight, and Prismatic Spray doesn't go off. The downside was you have to knock out every Doom Caliber Knight, so you can't stockpile them and knock out one per Prismatic Spray. They use one Prismatic Spray that takes out all the Doom Caliber Knights. And then you have to use a second one to blank their board, and then you'd be able to try to counter it. It was still ugly, still rough, but that was one of the ways to try to counter the Prismatic Spray use. If you were going to update this, that the common Scarlet Witch we talk about so much would be a great fit in this. Instead of Doom Caliber Knight being a 3 cost, would stop the action dice, and is also a bolt, so that would synergize in with Magic Missile on Hulk. But yeah, So our last card, Human Paladin. Generally was used for the global, or for the ability rather than the global ability. So while active, your characters in the field cannot be affected by global abilities used by your opponent. So this would stop stuff like force attack globals, force block globals, things your opponent would try to do to get your big beat sticks off the board before you wanted them off the board. Yeah, I've multiple times have taunted a Hulk or Jinzo into me, taken 2 damage from Jinzo, taunt Jinzo in, take 2 damage from his ability from using the global, and then take another 4 in the face just from his attack damage, just to get him off the board and try to slow my opponent down. Though often that didn't work still. Yeah, it was a tough team to deal with. But yeah, that's the whole team. Let's do a quick look at what first couple turns would look like. So back in those days, you actually got all 4 dice on your first turn. We're just gonna say, oh, 1 second. It doesn't matter. But yeah, so our first roll, something optimal would be, 2 energy to buy either Constantine or Black Widow. So we'll get Constantine here. Then opponent takes their turn during my turn, or during the end of their turn when they pass priority. We Xavier once, and then Xavier a second time. Let me bring up Xavier so you see the global there. And then turn 2, we would get all of this. We would optimally, we'd get like a sidekick. Then we would spend 3, get a polymorph. Let's go to polymorph, bring that up real quick. So we bought polymorph. Then opponent takes their turn, then our turn. During the priority to us, move 2 over with Xavier, move 2 over with Xavier again, move 2 over with Xavier yet again, and then roll. So this turn we would roll everything, and we'd actually take 1 damage and get the generic, 1 generic to use for our purchase. So that's 1 less we have to get for Jinzo. So yeah, here we would just go ahead and say, all right, we will spend these 5 plus the generic and get Jinzo. Just for the heck of it, we'll go ahead and field this Constantine. He costs 1. Then we will activate Polymorph, pull out the sidekick, bring in Jinzo. Sorry, I got this a little too high up. And yeah, now we have locked down this. So your opponent now gets priority. They can't really use Professor X without taking a whole bunch of damage. But they probably will anyway, so they'll take 4 to 6 damage here. Then their turn, you go ahead and do another Xavier and basically build your momentum back up and do it again and just keep on buying the big stuff and getting it out. You're basically just keeping your momentum going and crushing your opponent. It was rough to deal with, really rough to deal with. Yeah, I said it was Polyhulk, but brought in Jinzo first. But yeah, it really, Polyhulk, even after Jinzo started being used a lot, it was still Polyhulk. Rolled off the tongue a little better. But yeah, that's the team. That was always really rough to deal with. I always hated playing against it. But locals, if you want to bring it, bring it. I think I'm ready to take it on again. I've got a team this week that's all thieves. Probably doesn't stand a chance, but I wouldn't mind playing it. Go for it. Let's see what you can do. But yeah, what helped stop this team? Why did it fall out of favor? Why do people why did it stop getting played as much? Well, obviously rotation. Rotation's the big thing. Actually, let me go ahead and transfer back to this other view so you can see the whole team at once. Yeah, the big thing was rotation. That helped a lot. That took the majority of this team out. The only thing that stayed in after rotation, actually no, none of us stayed in after rotation, other than Magic Missile. So yeah, that was one thing, and that was nice. But other things that actually helped slow this down before rotation happened. You had some of the D&D stuff, like Dwarf Wizard did help. It was still rough to deal with, but he did aid in slowing this down. I gave you a couple more turns to be able to use Professor X to try to keep up. Then they would have to buy a second thing to be able to slow you down. In the meantime, it's back and forth. You could try to fight it off a little bit better. Other things that helped, Oracle. Having Oracle, the one that makes globals cost one more, helped a lot. So your opponent is going to Jinzo you. Well, you can get Oracle. She's not quite as good as Jinzo, but at least now they have to pay 2 energy rather than 1, so they can't run away with the game quite as much. It slows them down, gives you an opportunity to try to come up with a solution to what they've got. Of course, Prismatic Spray helped, but not as much as when Farron Under Siege came out. That helped a lot. Also, Clay Golem, I think, in Farron Under Siege helped a lot, because Clay Golem allows you to redirect 1 damage from another character onto Clay Golem. So if they went to Magic Missile their Hulk, you could redirect that damage onto Clay Golem, and Hulk would not trigger. So they would have to spend 3 energy in order to get Hulk to trigger once. So that was always pretty good. It helped. It was better than nothing. But yeah, there was a lot of little things that slowly moved this out of the main contention. And actually, this team, looking back, when Farron Under Siege came out, the Protection Bard, I was so upset by taking on this team so much. I was so excited about Protection Bard that I didn't notice the Master Lord's Alliance one as much, the one that gave everything a buff. It's like, nope, I like the Protection one. I think that one's so much better because it's going to help me against Polyhulk. And yeah, it did help. It did protect my characters from Hulk Blast, but in the end, it was the Master Lord's Alliance with it building up a big wall of things and just that flying in instead of a 1 Hulk, 1 Jinzo. That made the big difference, because with this team, with Polyhulk, it was usually like only 1, 2, maybe 3 dice out. They usually didn't have a big wall, but with the Bard team, that was all get a bunch of little guys out as quickly as possible, and then fly in and crush your opponent. And you could do that in like 4 or 5 turns. If they didn't have a ton of blockers, they were in trouble. So that was another thing that helped. The move to these really fast, aggressive, early turn kill teams also really hurt this team. Made it less played, but it's still a great team. It's still one hell of a hard thing to deal with, and yeah, it's one of those treasures from the golden age. But that's all for this week, folks. I hope you like this look back at the Polyhulk team. If there's another team you'd like me to take a look at, run through, just leave a comment, let me know. I'm happy to go through another team. I might even, I don't know, I might dust off my old Johnny Swarm team and go through that real quick. I still love that team. Still love Johnny Swarm. Watching my wife play with Johnny Storm here at our AVX draft a couple weeks ago made my heart flutter a little bit. Made me remember just how much I love Johnny Storm. Yeah, that was a great card. Yep, I miss him. Oh well. No, that's all for this week, folks. And looks like we did get audio this time. So catch you next time. See you on Sundays.